Okay, peeps, welcome back. So Bitcoin bounced huge today. And on the backing of that, also the Grayscale Trust and miners bounced huge as well. We're also going to go over the miners today. So with that being said, let's get it. All right. So first thing I want to point out to you guys here is that the RSI is resetting. The MACD is resetting. So that's good. Price is pulling down a little bit. Ideally, we don't really want to see the candle here on the current week close below this line. But again, if it does, I mean, Bitcoin likely is just going to range between 59 to 68,000. I would not really be concerned about the price of Bitcoin unless it got below this candle right here. So if we had a candle body close below 51,000, then I would be worried at that point because again, this would be considered a support level. That obviously would not be good. Even a close below this range would not be good. But the reason why I say 51,000 is because it would be getting pretty close to this trend line here. As long as this trend line holds, I think we should be good. This is kind of the accelerated trend line. So the current price of that sits at about 51,000. But the real indicator of whether we've entered into a bear market or not would be a break of this trend line. Do I think that's happening right now? No, I do not. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later as to why that is. So let's take a look at the daily now. So on the daily, we did have a pretty huge pop here. As you guys can see, the new candle opened up, but we had this massive move up here from just under 61K to 64K. So the EMAs are converging down. They look like they're potentially about to have a death cross. The last time that we actually saw that was right here. So it was a small pullback into this trend line here, this big macro trend line, or the first one, I should say. And then we pretty much just went straight up. So it was kind of a fake out. Same thing here. Also tested the trend line back there. Again, another fake out. This one was not quite at the trend line, but the drawdown wasn't really that much. So you can kind of see a common theme here. Even though there was a few more death crosses on the daily time frame, looking back throughout the year, the pullbacks were not really that steep. Again, we are in a bull market and a bull trend. So I suspect that this pullback's not going to be that steep. I think, once again, likely Bitcoin's just going to range around in the zone for a while. It could even do so all the way out here until we get to this trend line right here, which is a possibility somewhere in June, and then it could start smashing to the upside. That could happen. So one more thing I want to point out to you guys before we get into the other indicators on the chart is the monthly time frame. So on the monthly time frame, everything is looking good. MACD is bullish, RSI is bullish, even though there's a small pullback. Ideally, what we would like to see is that this candle does not close below this green candle here. As long as we get that, I think we're good. Prices should ideally be going higher. But you guys have to understand, I mean, when Bitcoin has had 7 months of green straight up, which we didn't even have in the last bull market cycle, and this was obviously way after the halving. Again, the halving hasn't even happened yet. It's basically tomorrow, according to this up here. There's going to be some kind of pullback. I mean, it's inevitable. Wouldn't surprise me if this thing did pull back to maybe like around 55K and then bounce from there. Just keep that in mind. Again, one more thing I want to point out is on the 12-month time frame. This is the last thing I'm going to point out on this chart. So zoom out here a little bit. You guys can basically see 1, 2, 3 green years and then a red year. That was the bear market year. Keep in mind these white lines are the halving. So second year was the halving, and then boom, straight up the following year. Bear market year, you have the pre-halving year, the halving year, and then the following bull market year again straight up. So again, 3 green candles, 1 bear market. So the pre-halving year here, big move up. The halving year, also another big move up. And ideally, if this pattern remains true, we should see another big year up next year. Again, we're only 8 months or 4 months into this year, so we have a long ways to go before this candle closes. Just wanted to point that out to you guys to give you kind of a big picture perspective, so to speak. So now let's get into the other indicators here. So again, Bitcoin clock, as you guys can see, the halving clock, we literally have 1 day until the halving. So again, that's estimated around the 20th. It could be could be the 19th, could be the 21st. We don't know. There's different Bitcoin clocks out there that have different kind of predicted times, but as you guys can see here, there's only ever been 3 halvings basically over the last 12 years. So this is really a big deal. This is going to set in stage the cut in supply of Bitcoin in half from 6.25 to 3.125 blocks. And we already know that the spot Bitcoin ETFs are trying to suck up all the Bitcoin out of existence. So basically, decrease supply, increase demand. What do you think the price is going to do? Most likely, it's going to go up. Just saying. That's what happened every other time before. So basically, search term crypto on Google Trends, 5-year chart. Still looking very low, which indicates the vast majority of retail has not entered the space yet. As you guys can see, this is kind of an indicator of when retail is entering the space. Very similar thing with Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's up a little bit. It's at 38, but not even close to a high up here. So you can see 80, 100. This was like a 90, then another 100. You guys can tell basically at a bird's eye view what this says. So this is when I'd be worried up here. This is when I'd probably be looking to get out when these are at all-time highs. As of right now, I'd say we're still very, very early in the bull run because, again, retail is not aping in just yet. So let's take a look at something else. Let's go how to buy crypto. See what pops up. As you guys can see on this metric, it's extremely low. Okay. So back here during the Bitcoin top, we had 100. And then on this peak, we had about a 50. Yeah, we're not even at 10 right now. So again, still very, very, very early on in terms of the retail space entering in. If we go how to buy Bitcoin, you guys can see that we're still very low on this, which means that basically we are all, those of us that are buying crypto right now are early on both the Bitcoin bull run and the altcoin season. And I know Bitcoin's at all-time highs, but again, I think it's going to have a retracement and probably 6 to 7 months from now, somewhere in there, we're going to see new all-time highs. So again, fear and greed has pulled back a little bit. So we're kind of somewhere between the yellow and the just barely greed zone. Indicating maybe Bitcoin could pull back a little bit further before it starts popping off again in the altcoins. Again, I expect that during a bull market, we're probably going to range somewhere between 50 to 100 on this thing, especially with the back end of the spot ETFs. But it could be possible we could have a big 30, 40% drop. I would not discount it. That happened last cycle and the one before that. 30% pullbacks in a bull market in crypto are very common. So MVRV, this thing is still very heavily discounted when we get into these pink zones right here. That's when I'd be worried. It's topped. I mean, it's predicted nearly every single cycle peak perfectly when it gets into these zones, with the exception of the November top, which obviously was a little bit more de-risked. But again, that's the reason why we use different indicators in confluence with each other. So according to this metric, we're still very early. It's not a perfect buy, but it's definitely, in my opinion, way far away from being some kind of blow off top. So Bitcoin rainbow chart, again, we're pretty much right at the halving. It does say buy. I would say that probably anywhere between hodl and maximum bubble territory. If we see something like that in the next month and a half, or not month and a half, year and a half, anything in between the hodl and the maximum bubble territory, in my opinion, would be, just my opinion, of course, a good time to start potentially scaling out and or get out completely. And we'll go over what the possible price targets are here in a minute. So fear and greed, or not fear and greed, the Newpol chart, this one's a little bit more overextended, which is another reason why I think we are going to have some kind of short-term pullback. Again, I think it's just simply going to be a correction. I really don't foresee at this point being a bear market. I just don't think so. Again, because the halving's tomorrow, we've never had a bear market. As a matter of fact, we've never even had a bear market the same year of the halving. I guess if you want to count 2020, technically that would have been like a bear market, but not really, because the same year we went to new all-time highs. So that was more of a black swan event. That's a little bit different. But yeah, basically, this just indicates being a little overheated, but again, far away from, I would say, maximum bubble territory. So Pi cycle top, I'm going to dig into this one a little bit more, probably in a separate video, I would say. But basically, the gist of it is, so if we look at the current prices, so the 111-day moving average, which is the yellow line, as you guys can see on the chart, is 55K. If we go back to the chart here on Bitcoin, you guys can see 55K is right around this blue EMA. So it could pull back to the blue EMA, which again is just right above this trend line that we have here. And then we could see a bounce on Bitcoin. It may not even pull back that much. It's hard to say. Honestly, we really don't know. But the top of this band is roughly about 77K. So we're kind of stuck in between it. Again, this is another reason why we would like to see some kind of correction and or sideways chop for the next 6 months, because it would kind of drag out the Pi cycle top, give it more time to kind of spread out, so to speak, and give us more time in general in the future. Like instead of the bull run ending in, say, 6 months, it could end in like, or I wouldn't even say 6 months. Well, yeah, I'd say 6 months. Instead of it ending in like 6 months, maybe we see a top, maybe like the middle of next year instead. So you guys see my point on that. But just so y'all understand, the Pi cycle top indicator does not pop up when the price action hits one or the other lines. It pops up when the two lines converge. So when the yellow converges at or above the green line, that is when the Pi cycle top is in. Okay. As you guys can see by the dotted lines back here, every single time we've had one for the last 4 times. So the point that we're at now is we're testing the green one. Okay. And I want you guys to notice every time we've tested the green one, we have had a pullback. So we tested it, pullback, and then we eventually broke out of the green one and then went up. And then your indicator pops up and then boom, bull cycle's over. Again, tested the green one, pulled back, boom, popped above it, indicator popped up, bull cycle over. Tested the green one many different times on 2017. Boom, popped above it, retested, boom, straight up. Eventually we got the pop up of the indicator. And also very same thing last cycle. So tested the green moving average, as you guys can see here, pulled back a little bit, not that much on this previous cycle, and then boom, popped up. And then eventually the indicator popped up. So I think the important thing to note from this is from the first time that we tested this thing, we'll say back here, August 2012, and then the indicator popped up in April 2013. That was about a 10-month stretch in between. First time we tested it here, September 2013, then it popped up roughly about 3 months later here. So that's about 3 months. Of course, Bitcoin was much newer back then, so the moves were much faster and more volatile. Tested it for the first time back here, June 2016. Indicator popped up in 2017 of December, so a year and a half. And tested it back here in November 2020, and the Pi cycle top indicator popped up in April of 2021, so roughly about 5 months. So it could be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months. We really don't know at this point. I mean, if Bitcoin chops around sideways and or pulls back quite a bit, let's say it pulls back to maybe even this trend line down here, which I don't see as likely, but 35,000, that could cause this indicator to take longer to play out. The important thing that we want to focus on at this point is that this is testing the green MA, as you guys can see, and at some point it's going to break out above it. And when it does, I would say that's the final parabolic move, and we should be on the lookout for the Pi cycle top indicator. So we don't need to go over it here because we already looked at it on this thing right here, but I can tell you guys right now it has not popped up yet. So let's go over to the Bitcoin miners now. As you guys can see, the miners had a massively green day. At some point, they were up a lot more. They were up like 10, 12, 14%. So I guess a little pullback at the end of the day, but mostly green on these. So let's go ahead and go over them. The first thing I want to point out to you guys is a lot of these have earnings coming up. Okay. So May 8th for CleanSpark, that's pretty much just right around the corner. Mara also on May 8th. And also on May 8th, Riot. So if you guys are trading options on any of these with the wheel strategy, cash secured puts, and or recovery calls, do keep in mind volatility increases massively during that time frame. So may not necessarily be a great idea to trade options during that time frame. Of course, it's up to you. And hold on a sec. I actually got to move out to a different time frame here so I can maybe show you guys this. Okay, so now we got the earnings pulled up. So it's going to be a while before HUD 8 pops up, so we don't need to worry about that so much. So BTBT is just right around the corner. That's literally next week. And Cypher is at the start of next month. And actually going to move bit F up here because we did say we were going to talk about this one too. So bit F is roughly about the middle of next month. So there's your guys' earning dates for that. The two things I wanted to point out before we actually get into the charts first is that both Riot, I believe it's Riot and Mara are oversold on the RSI. So yeah, as you guys can see, RSI touched the bottom of the range here just recently. Last time we had that, there was a massive rip to the upside. And then the time before that, as you guys can see back here, again, massive rip to the upside. Does it mean it's going to go up? Not necessarily. It could, the RSI and the price could go lower, but I just wanted to point this out to you guys. So again, we hit oversold on the RSI here at the bottom of this range on Riot. Also back here, we did have it, although this was a fake out. So it did have an initial pop up, but then it went lower and the RSI went up. That's known as bullish divergence when the price goes down and the RSI goes up. So it was kind of a fake out signal, but it did eventually bounce shortly after that. So, and then you have this oversold signal right here, which in this case was a massive rip. I mean, you would have basically bought down at like $4 and this thing would have topped out at $20. So you'd be looking at potentially a 5x on that move. So with that being out of the way, let's now get into the weekly time frame. So CleanSpark is having a death cross here on the MACD, or at least it looks like it's about to. But we are bouncing off the zones. So again, support is between 1240 and 1370, and resistance is between 2120 and $24. And the wick high up there is just shy of $25. If you wanted to wait for this pullback, that's up to you. It may not pull back, but that move would be about 62% to about 80% to the peak of that resistance, and then 89, 90% somewhere in there respectively. Mara, so this one has pulled back down below this support level, so I would say this is actually resistance now. But then again, Mara is oversold on the daily, so this thing could just bounce relatively soon. We don't know. But support's going to be between 670 to about 1220. Resistance is $18 to $20. If this flips into support, we'll let you know. So just assuming you wanted to say, I don't know, get in at the trend line at 1070, you'd be looking at about 66% to about 87% on that move. So Riot, this thing is currently testing support. As you guys can see, it broke this trend line here, but again, this wasn't like a big major macro trend line. It's kind of like a little smaller one. So support currently sits between 780 to about 10 and a quarter, and then resistance is between 1860 to roughly about $21. So pretty cheap right now. I mean, it could go a lot higher. It's possible. So $19 to, or sorry, not $19. What am I saying? So 130% to about 157% would be the move on that one. Okay, so HUD 8, we do have a falling wedge here. That's generally a bullish pattern. It has not confirmed one way or another yet, but we also have the support here. So if it broke bullish out of this wedge and headed for resistance again, I would not be surprised. Again, that support is somewhere between 360 to about $9 and 1720 to 2250 on resistance. There's a lot of support here, so I don't think it's likely to get below that. And it also goes back pretty far back here, as you guys can see, and here. So we'll just say maybe you wanted to get in now and maybe DCA down to this level, which again is up to you. You'd be looking at about 168 to 252% on that move. BTBT, this one is currently testing support. Again, there's a lot of support right here. It does look like it's wanting to go below that. So, of course, no guarantees. You also have resistance here. So this is a very well tested zone. I would say it's probably going to hold. So between 160 to about $2, and then resistance is 420 to about 480, and the wick high up there is, if I can get it, roughly about 530 a share. So the move on this one would be roughly about 116% to 145%, and then up to that wick high, 167%. So Cypher, I would not buy this one. If I was going to do this, I would do put options, and I would just simply have my delta be like around a 20 or so, assuming that this thing's going to come lower. I'd try to get in as cheap as I could on 100 share lots. That's just me. So support is between 210 to about 270, and resistance 490 to about 550, 580 on that wick high there. If you wanted to wait for the pullback into the zone, it'd be looking at about 101% to 127%, and then 140% to get all the way to that wick high up there. So BitF, this thing has actually fallen below this resistance. So I would say, it was actually support, but now it's resistance. I would say this is going to turn into resistance unless this candle turns to be like a massive green candle by the end of tomorrow. It could be a fake out. We'll just have to wait and see. But as of right now, support's going to be roughly about 41 cents to 94 cents, and resistance is going to be 201 to 240. In my opinion, I'd be waiting for a pullback on this one. It could bottom out at about $1.20, $1.30, somewhere in there. There's a lot of price action there, so that's possible. So if it bottoms out at 130, that's where you want to get in. Be looking at about 50 to 75%. However, if you wanted to wait for the zone, or let's say maybe even the bottom of these candles here at 88 cents, you'd be looking at about 112 to 145%. Now, in terms of which ones I think are cheap and expensive right now, I would say a CLSK is a good one to get into. Maybe plan on DCAing down because this thing could still go lower. That's a possibility. Mara, this one, I honestly, at this point, the pullback is so big that I would say that, I would say that now would probably be a good time to start DCAing in, but maybe not buying heavy. Again, this is not financial advice. This is just how I would do this if I was going to trade these. I'd be either DCAing in or waiting for it to touch into the support. Riot, it's perfectly in the buy zone. It couldn't be a more perfect entry in my opinion at this point. Again, what you guys choose to do with that is entirely up to you. HUD 8, again, that's also within the buy zone, very close to those candle bottoms there. Very, very good entry in my opinion. Risk reward is pretty solid in terms of the spread here. BTBT, also very good risk reward. This one is again within the buy zone. Could come a little bit lower. So if I was going to do this, I would DCA in, or I would just, again, do some put options, probably like maybe a $2 strike or a $1.50 strike, something like that with a little bit further out date. If I wanted to get the shares immediately off the market, I'd just buy it straight off the market and not do the put options because it's such a smaller cap stock, you may not have as much volume, which means you might have to put further out expiration dates. Cypher, I'd be waiting for further pullback on this one. It's kind of basically in the middle of these two zones. I don't like to buy when it looks like that. And Cypher, BitF, I would actually wait quite a while to buy this one. I'd want to see if it's going to come down to the zone or not. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.